let's move to the cloud first, do a single cloud. And if you really, I mean, some industries might be regulated and you need to have at least a multi-cloud strategy.
Right, for GDPR reasons, for example.
Exactly, but at least start with one and don't make a huge plan, because plans are about to fail. You make plans, you run them, and they're going to fail. So you need to get the experience. You need to do step by step. And if you just try multi-cloud from the get-go, usually it doesn't work out. And sometimes you don't even need it. Maybe you're okay. Maybe you'll be fine on one cloud, and maybe you'll actually save some money because you have focused on a single technology, and you don't need to like diversify too much your engineering talent. And
so on the multi-cloud front, Franz actually said, look, don't do it. Don't go, stay in AWS, enjoy it, and fight back. If ever anybody tells you to go multi-cloud, unless it's absolutely business critical, don't do it. Can you, to that sort of rare bit of wisdom that Franz gave me that day, is that what? How does Giant Swarm sort of fit in on the cloud strategy?
So we do a bit of a balance act there. So we do usually prefer if someone just says like, okay, I'm focusing on the single cloud, but at the same time we try to abstract the cloud away from them and try to have a platform that is always the same no matter on which cloud it is.
Can you describe that platform?
Yeah, sure. It's basically it's vanilla open source. So it is under the hood. There is cluster API, not just under the hood, but even towards the customers. There's basically you get a management cluster that is Kubernetes, and you have a Kubernetes API with which you can talk and use the tools that you're used to use against Kubernetes and manage the lifecycle of clusters. And kind of the twist that we have
So it's a cluster of clusters.
Cluster of clusters, exactly, right? So it's like clusterception, you could say.
Clusterception. I love that. You heard it here first, folks. Clusterception.
Don't quote me on that.
So you can quote me on clusterception.
No, but really, that's kind of where Kubernetes was built for. Like, Kubernetes is a platform for building platforms. And using it to...
We actually mentioned that a few times today.
Right? A lot of people mention that. And we're now finally seeing it. Finally, we have the building blocks like Cluster API also in upstream. Like we used to build everything ourselves.
Cluster API was a very recent addition, no?
Exactly. Like it started already, I think, 2017 or so. We started talking, the Heptio people and some others. And slowly but surely we got there. And today it was even mentioned on the keynote. So
Which keynote was that?
It was the one by Mercedes-Benz.
Okay.
So they're using it actually in production to manage 900 plus clusters.
Wow.
That's showing you it is there. It's still kind of a bit not the mainstream, but at least we are betting basically our product on it. Everything that we have been building before, we're replacing with upstream cluster API because we believe that doing a consensus open source approach is always the best one. And what we just add on top is our experience from running production clusters for like the last 5 or 6 years across the globe in different clouds and saying, okay, how can we make the experience out of the box as production ready as possible? So I don't get just like the test cluster, but when I start a cluster, it's always directly production ready. And the next step then is like, I don't just need a cluster, right? I need observability in there. I need some pipelines, and usually nowadays I need GitOps, right?
Yes.
So, I need a lot of security. And I also need maybe an API gateway, maybe I need Nginx Ingress, maybe I need Kong. And at some point, it becomes a full platform. Right. But it's a platform where you have building blocks that you can switch out, and you're using the abstractions. And at some point, that platform gets extended towards the developer with like inner loop tooling like Garden, for example.
Yeah. Well, this is the first time where I had an interview guest who has actually mentioned us by name and knows it. Did you? I guess you did your research.
I've got in touch with Garden, I think, the first time KubeCon Seattle.
Oh, that was in 2018, right?
Yes. I was actually sitting on the way back from Seattle to Frankfurt, I was sitting next to one of your founders. I don't remember which one.
Jon, Aethor, or Thor.
I think it was Jon, but I'm not sure anymore. It has been a while, so and we were all jet lagged and tired from all the parties at Seattle.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I think a few months later we even had some meetings to see if like there's some way of like some synergies, right?
Yeah, yeah.
We are basically infrastructure and infrastructure services, maybe platform services, but we don't go the last mile basically towards the engineers that are actually writing the code. Like the place we stop is basically the GitOps, right? But then you have the inner loop development that is on the engineer side, on the developer side, that is tightly integrated with the cluster management, with the infrastructure, but it's still not where we have our kind of core business.
Exactly. So back to Giant Swarm, you mentioned that you mentioned it's a modular platform. So for example, if you don't want the API gateway, you could swap it in for something else. Or if you don't want traffic, you could have, for example, Nginx ingress, right?
Yeah. Okay. So we do have some recommendations, and some things, if you choose the one that we have been running for a while, we might be able to give you 24/7 on it. So we might be able to take your pager for you, but I don't want to take away the choice. And I prefer open source tools. I prefer, for example, an open source monitoring stack with Prometheus, Loki, maybe soon some tracing components in there.
We just spoke to the Bonsai Cloud people earlier. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they're the brains behind Logging Operator, which is in Rancher, and other really cool open source stacks like that for observability.
Really good software. They're doing really nice software. Very good blog and documentation.
Absolutely.
Bonsai people, to be honest, like really good work. And but you like, as much as we love open source in this community, there's people that made decisions already sometimes, right? And these decisions are okay if you prefer Datadog, if you prefer maybe a SaaS solution to your monitoring, or you want a full APM like Instana or what have you, then you should be able to keep that choice, right? I don't need to force feed you my open source stuff, right? I like it, I prefer it, I can tell you why I think it's better and it will benefit you, but I'm not that opinionated, to be honest.
So what kind of sort of target developer do you have in mind when, is a developer, are they in a very early stage startup? Are they in maybe a startup that is already has picked their Kubernetes flavor, but they're looking for something a little bit more agnostic? What's sort of the market there?
Yeah, so our target market is more a very big company market. So it's more enterprises that need fleet management, that need more than just a few clusters. Like some of our customers have 60, 100 clusters, maybe like 60 or 100 or like even more clusters through like 8 or 9 different regions of a cloud, maybe even on-premise on top of that.
Aren't you behind the like Adidas's cluster?
They're, for example, like very regionally distributed, let's say. And those...
Even Edge?
Not yet, let's say. We'll be working on that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, clusters in the edge. I mean, for retailer, that would be like in the stores, maybe, for example. So that would be an interesting thing to think about. But even with like not being fully edge, but having 60 or 100 clusters, you need a fleet management software. You need to manage not just clusters, but also your platform at scale. And that's where our product shines. And additionally, because we are always giving 24/7 on our product, so we are basically an extension of the customer's SRE team. So if something goes down in an Adidas hype sale, let's say even in China, one of us wakes up and is on it to fix it. So it's not like you create a support ticket somewhere.
So it's very turnkey, like, or it's very white glove.
Exactly. So the good thing about that for us as engineers is we get direct feedback about our product. So if I'm on call for the product I built, and I get paged for it 3 times a week, then I'm gonna fix my bugs.
Right.
Right? And I'm gonna be very interested in bringing the customer forward to be more mature in the cloud native journey. Right? So what we do, like how we segment kind of like our customers is we see how mature are they in their customer journey, and we put them in like so-called rooms, and we say, okay, we'll try to move you to a higher maturity, to more automation. So in the early days, you might need like a graphical user interface where you're like clicking together clusters, and you need like one-click installs of apps. But that's not the goal.
We don't want pets. We want cattle.
Exactly. You want to automate the things. You most probably want to nowadays bring it into a declarative state on Git, and that's where we try to bring people towards, because that's when they actually can focus on the value add as a company that they have, and not focus on the infrastructure. Because I mean, infrastructure should be boring. If infrastructure is interesting, you have an incident.
Yeah. Yeah. No. It should be actually the lunar people there at Neobank. They have some really interesting infrastructure behind them, but they talk a lot about a Wardley map. Are you familiar with the Wardley mapping?
Simon Wardley, right?
Yeah, Simon Wardley.
CTO is a big fan of it.
Yeah.
I'm here.
The map of like what is visible versus invisible, and you don't want a lot of visible things, right?
Indeed, yeah, especially
sitting around your
infrastructure, right? It's like here at KubeCon, we're all like about these things in infrastructure, but the more you go towards the end user and even to the end developer, the less you want infrastructure to play a part in that. You want it to move away, and that's why we have these abstractions, right? Already in Kubernetes with the CNI, CSI, all these kind of abstraction layers, but also on top of that with the developer platforms. And in a way, your product is also an abstraction layer between the engineers and the actual infrastructure.
Right. Indeed, yeah. It's sort of mediating it and making it, pushing it out of the way and letting the developer do their work.
On what they've been hired for, actually.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that was actually also why we founded Giant Swarm back in the days.
When was that, actually?
2014. Back in the company before Giant Swarm, 30% of engineering went into infrastructure management. So 30% is quite a cost factor.
That's huge, yeah. Especially for a huge company like Adidas.
Exactly. And so when Docker came around, Timo, our CTO, was like, hey, this is the future. We need to automate these things away. We need to build basically what was like microservices architecture for workloads. We need to have that on the infrastructure side. That's why Kubernetes is so cool. We're bringing all the cool things from the microservice era into the infrastructure place, and we're making it more pluggable, right?
Yeah.
Building interfaces between the observability and the infrastructure and the platforms and the container management and all these things.
Yeah. I'm just taking a moment just to let the ideas gel here. So, compared to something, I run OpenShift at home in a home lab, and one of their products is, and I like OpenShift because I think it's funny, I made this point on the stream earlier, people sort of see the OpenShift as like this intimidating pile of stuff. Yeah, right? Sure, yeah, and it's like, well, it's too much to actually think about, but I really like it because it actually gives me everything that I need right out of the box. If I want GitOps, there's the included GitOps operator, etc. But they also have the Red Hat cluster manager. So they have, how would you say that compares to, for example, Giant Swarm's offering? Or
it's very similar, actually.
Yeah?
So I think there is a lot of similarities. I think where we are a bit different in philosophies is we are trying to expose everything towards the customer. We're not trying to abstract away too much.
Okay.
While we have this out-of-the-box approach with very sensible defaults, a lot of high security, just like OpenShift,
Yeah.
which has like really high security.
Sensible security defaults come with Giant Swarm?
Exactly.
Oh, that's great.
We always needed. We're the first ones who had RBAC on by default.
Uh-huh.
The ones who had pod security policies on by default.
I had no idea.
And I was much in touch with Jordan Liggett from Red Hat about these things. And the place where we are a bit, I think, different is we make it more more modular, and it's easier to switch out components. And for our customers, they can actually even go onto the root of machines and change kernel values or change control plane flags in Kubernetes.
In Giant Swarm.
Yeah. So we do want to give that freedom, because what we believe, you had that with like PaaS-like systems always, where you're building abstractions, but the abstractions build artificial limits.
Yes, yes.
And if you cannot poke through those limits, then at some point you're going to build very ugly workarounds. And you're always going to have them, and they're going to be insecure most of the time and against your regulations and compliance. So giving the opportunity to, as the engineers are maturing, as the software is maturing, to let them poke through and say, okay, now I know I need to have this tweak. I know I need, I don't know, a different kind of MTU because I have different kinds of networks. Being able to allow that, that's very powerful. And that's something that I believe in. It's very hard on us as a team, because giving a lot of freedom, it's the Spider-Man, like with a lot of power comes.
Yeah, great power comes great responsibility.
Responsibility, right? So, but I don't want to set limits. I want to set maybe some guardrails, but you should be able to say, okay, today is like guardrail free, and this is a playground, I'm going to test it, and once we've tested it, then we can roll even that really like low level tweak into production. Because especially with enterprises, and we're not like focused on a certain industry, you need the flexibility to adapt to use cases that you might not know about. And I think our customers are the professionals in their industries. So they should be able to say, okay, in my industry, I really, really need this because I don't know, I have 5 million concurrent WebSocket connections. So that's different from other customers most probably. So giving them like a single product without the knobs, that wouldn't work for most of them.
Yeah, so it sounds to me like it's a very flexible product as compared to some of the competitors. How would you say that it compares to something like Kubernetes?
I don't know much about Kubernetes these days, to be honest, so I cannot say much about it.
Are you guys using? Are you folks are you using virtualized clusters at all? Or they're all real clusters?
Yeah, all are real clusters, and what we really have as a philosophy is not building too much interdependence between management and workload clusters, for example. So if something goes down, it shouldn't influence anything else. So if the management plane goes down, all the workloads should, and all the workload clusters should still be running. So we're not running any virtualized control planes, and everything is always a full cluster. Even our management cluster is indeed under the hood. It's the same as the workload cluster that the customer gets. Everything is
independently functioning.
Exactly, and everything is private in the account or the data center of the customer. We don't own any infrastructure. We just get a site-to-site VPN, so we feel like an internal SRE, and we take care of our stuff, but it's owned by the customer, all the infrastructure, and they can profit from all the kinds of hyperscaler deals that they can get and the discounts and reserved instances.
They just pay for the support.
Exactly, they basically just pay for the subscription that is Giant Swarm for us being there when they break things. So like one of our customers used to explain, like we asked him like in like a few words, how would you explain it? It's like, we break it, you fix it.
That's great.
And that's pretty much it. Not that they break that much. I mean, we are very good. We have a good relationship, and that's how it only can work. If you have a good relationship and still be able to make it scalable. Like, I don't like to run a fork per customer or do a lot of customizations. We're basically 3 people on call for hundreds of clusters at the same time at different customers. So it needs to be, that's based on a very stable and reliable product. So otherwise, like, I'm not a consulting business or a service business that needs to scale with like customers. You need to be a product company, basically. Like,
well, I just have 2 questions for you left. The first is, if a developer just wants to kick the tires on Giant Swarm, kind of wants to, maybe they're part of a platform team in an existing company, and they're like, hey, what's this Giant Swarm thing? Can I try it out? You said it was open source, it's built on open source. Are they able to do something like that? Can they go to Giant Swarm's website and just get going, or is there another sort of avenue toward figuring?
I would love to say yes to that, to be honest.
Yeah.
But the current answer is sadly, like we are open source. You could be running Giant Swarm without us even knowing. However, it's a very complex system with a lot of knobs and a lot of interconnected components. So it would be really hard to run it yourself because we have not much documentation about it out there. We would like to offer more shared open public environments where people could just put in a cloud account and then start a cluster. Currently we can do that, but because of security reasons, you would need to ping us, and then we would give you maybe some access.
How do you suggest then that curious developers reach out or get started?
Basically, reach out to anyone that you can find. Like, I'm personally open for being pinged on any kind of platform.
Talk to Puja. Puja is very active on Twitter, by the way.
Yeah, on Twitter, that's usually where I react the fastest. Or reach out to fronts and sales. They are definitely usually even quicker than me to reply and be able to say, is Giant Swarm even the right solution for you? Because we're definitely not the right solution for everyone. So understanding if there is a good fit would be best before you invest a lot of time just trying things out, because we might not be the best solution for everything. Like, there's a lot of good products out there, and they all have a good reason to live and a good reason to be prosper on this market.
Last question is, are there any talks that you're looking forward to that you can recommend viewers joining us virtually, maybe join in the coming days? Is there are there any? Are you doing a talk yourself?
No, I'm not doing. I'm trying to not do talks this year.
Okay, you did too many last year.
Yeah, no, not last year, but like in the first half of the year, and in the last half of last year was a bit too many, let's say, for my workload right now. But I haven't looked through all the talks yet. There's a few topics that I'm extremely interested in these days. One is Cluster API. I mean,
Cluster API.
Anything that is Cluster API, it's the future of cluster management.
It's the future of cluster management, Cluster API.
And the other thing that, again, an API, Gateway API. So if you're looking at the next version of Ingress, that's going to be Gateway API. Most Ingress controllers.
Oh, really? Oh, this is not something I knew about. So next, in your opinion, the next version of Ingress controllers is going to be Gateway API? Yes. This is a new feature coming to Kubernetes.
Now in beta, I think. It's pushed by SIG Network. It's a consensus. Most Ingress controllers and most Ingress controller providers are rebasing and supporting Gateway API.
What makes you excited about Gateway API?
It is two things. One is the direct interface to more mature modern technologies like service meshes. The other thing that makes me, especially in the enterprise, a lot excited is it has more multi-tenancy in build. So you have different levels of management and administration, where in an enterprise you usually don't give out all the rights to the engineers. You have different teams that manage different levels of API, for example. And in Gateway API, you have that inbuilt. You can even define policies on different levels, and that's why it's very powerful going forward to define basically the gateways, the exposition of services in a more granular way and on certain levels.
I'm going to check this out. It sounds really interesting. Thank you so much for taking the time today, Puja. It's been a pleasure. Really. Yeah, likewise. Great. And maybe I'll see you tomorrow then.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, cool.
Yep.
See you. All right. So that was our last interview with Puja Abbassi, who's the VP of Product at Giant Swarm. That was really interesting. I love the Giant Swarm team. They're so technically knowledgeable, and they really know their customer base. And when I was actually reaching out to Franz Schubert, the head of sales,